Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna K770 concrete saw, power cutter, whatever you want to call it. Customer complaint on this one is that if he can get it started, it just bogs out and dies. So there's a lot of possibilities on this one. First thing we're going to do, like all our repairs, is pull the fuel cap off and go digging around in the fuel tank and see what's in there. Now you can't really see into the bottom of these concrete saw tanks very well, and lately I just kind of been either dumping the fuel or skipping that step. In this case it looks like they might actually do some maintenance. That filter on there looks really good, like it was just replaced, probably in a reaction to the fact that it wasn't running right. But we pressure tested it and it's just fine. We're going to put the filter back on. So let's pop the hood and see what we got under here. You know, every time you lift one of these up, there's just concrete dust everywhere, right? Not today. You know, I used to hate working on these things. I hope this saw doesn't convert me. Again, I assume a reaction to the fact that it wasn't running right. They tried to do everything they could and were unsuccessful. Looks like there's a new spark plug in it, so let's take a look in the cylinder and make sure that it's not scored. By golly, it looked good in there. Alright, I guess it's time to see what she'll do, huh? No go. So right here, what you see right now, me standing there, is pretty much the extent of the diagnosis on this. I had an idea what was wrong when the customer brought it in. A fuel related issue is what I was thinking. And after running it there for a second, I confirmed that it was a fuel related issue. What I don't know yet is what kind of fuel related issue. Is it a lack of fuel? Is it something else? It felt like it was a lack of fuel. It was bogging. Alright, when you pull these things apart, there's a single screw here. You got to access through the edge of the air filter cover to get to that screw. Once you pull that out, you're separating the intake runner from the cylinder. Now, on the side closest to me, there's a main fuel line. On this side here, there is a short line from the purge bulb to the carburetor. And right now I'm digging in there with the pliers to unsnap the throttle linkage from the trigger lever. Here comes the fuel line on this side. There's your throttle linkage hanging there. And we're going to plug the other fuel line that comes from the tank. After doing all this, the carb assembly just lifts right off. And what do we find? We find we have a broken or a rotten fuel hose. Our carb linkage, we'll put that back on later. So now that we know that the hose was broken, let's take a look and see if any dirt got sucked in the engine. And it looks pretty good in there. I got no complaints. Now, that broken hose, does that mean that we were right or wrong on our diagnosis of a lack of fuel? Well, it means we were right. I mean, it was sucking a lot of air, but it wasn't sucking it through the carburetor, so it wasn't drawing fuel. Alright, if you want to pull the carburetor off this air box, there's 4 screws that hold it in. 2 long ones that hold the carburetor to the base and two short ones that hold the small manifold for the strato charge tubes to the base of the airbox. What a mess, huh? These things are so damn dirty. So we'll inspect these two airlines here, make sure there's no cracks in them. That other little hose right there is the impulse hose to run the fuel pump in the carburetor. I didn't have a new hose, so I talked to the customer and he was alright with a used one. And I just want to verify that this one's actually going to fit in there, so I was kind of matching it up a little bit. Now these hoses fit into the manifold. There's a groove around the edge of the hose, and it just gets pressed through there and snaps into place. Now we have to do the same thing on the other end. You see this little brownish plastic piece on here. That hole lets the, what do I want to say? It keeps the shape of the hose so it doesn't collapse. If you're going to go digging around in there with a pry bar or something to assist yourself getting that boot together, this one I used here is plastic. It's not nearly as sharp as a screwdriver, so just be careful because you don't want to wreck the new part. So now that we've got the intake boot in place, we're going to put that little plastic ring form-fitting thingamabob back in there that holds the shape at the end of the tube. That's a gasket, 16-inch thick rubber gasket, and we're going to bolt the carburetor to the intake boots and then to that airbox. You have to route your pulse line there's only one way it can go. Route it in there and hook it up to the carburetor, and then just set the carb on top of the airbox and get your screws back in there. Reverse order how you took it apart. No big deal. Now that boot was torn. There's probably a few different ways that could have tore. Maybe you've got anti-vibe mounts that are broken, or someone was doing maintenance and yanked the carburetor or something and tore the boot, or just maybe got old and tore. So we're putting the main fuel line on the carburetor right now. And then the next thing we're going to do is put the throttle linkage on. Get it behind that choke lever. Kind of lay the carburetor in place and then snap that throttle linkage into the throttle lever groove. It just snaps in there. Then we're going to put the fuel line on that goes between the carburetor and the primer bulb. This is just a regular piece of hose. The return line off the primer bulb is a formed hose. Now the choke lever has to be in the right spot to let the choke linkage drop into place and let the carburetor drop down into place. If you look from the side, you can see the intake plate. It drops down into a groove, and then this screw goes in on top and draws it in and tightens the whole plate up to the cylinder. Trick is finding the screw. I can see it from here. I don't know why that guy couldn't see it. Yeah. He's right there.
Warning, bullshit alert.
Alright, we got the screw in, running, passing through that hole in the air filter box. Double check to make sure that that plate is still down into the, there's a little catch on the bottom that it lands in. And if you push down on that plate while you screw in, it kind of helps hold it in there. We just double check that it's where it's supposed to be because it doesn't always go together right the first time. We hit the primer bulb, things act normal. This little nut right here, I'm going to take that out because the other 5 nuts already fell out on their own and I don't want to lose this while I'm test running it. Well, there you go. It seems to run, doesn't it? These nuts have a threaded hole in them. It's not centered in the nut. So they only go in one way. And if I remember right, you put the thinner walled end in first. Then we put on our mid cover. Man, some guys just torque these things down and it really creates problems trying to get them apart the next time. If you break one of them screws off, or worse, just strip it out and don't break it at all, it can be a nightmare getting that thing apart. So now the air intake from the flywheel feeds air up into the air box. We'll get that boot set into place. Put our next, let's see, the first one must have been the lower cover, not the mid cover. This one's the mid. And our top cover looks like it's got some damage to it actually. As I was screwing it down, I was looking and thinking, that don't look so good. And we got some stuff laying around, so we're gonna, I think this one's off a K760. But it appears to be the same except for the decals. Just going to need a little bit of cleaning up and then we'll bolt it on there. So that pretty much completes the K770 Power Cutter. Won't start, and if it does, it bogs. Repair video. So thanks for watching. Later.